So this was by far my most intense Sasquatch encounter out of both expeditions, all my time in the woods. This happened May 2023, pretty shortly into my Little Pond Oreille expedition. It was about 3 weeks in, and a couple of things had happened, a couple of weird things had happened up until before this encounter. I'm pretty sure I heard vocalizations one night, as well as like a weird, it sounded like an apocalyptic siren that would like move across the woods and then blare out. It would move like a quarter mile at a time and then blare. But anyway, that was pretty much all that had happened up until that point. But the spot I was in, it was actually private land, but I didn't realize it at the time. But there was like a campsite and then kind of like a field next to it, but it dipped down, and there were a couple isolated trees in the field. Then across the field was a creek, and between like 5 and 10 yards of underbrush and trees between the field and the creek. And I was kind of by the campsite, and I was parked on the road, but I was kind of parked maybe 15 to 20 yards away from the campsite for some shade. And I remember I was sitting in my car, and I was just on my phone brainstorming, taking notes, and I heard like a hoot. And I remember when I heard it, I remember thinking that's either an owl or a Sasquatch. It wasn't like it wasn't like a whoop like I expected. It was more just like a whoop. That wasn't it, but something kind of like that. And I remember hearing that and looking over there, and a couple moments passed by, and I started seeing the tops of the trees move down the creek, and it reminded me of Jurassic Park, but it was totally silent. Like I didn't hear the trees move. I just saw them like kind of like shake down the creek. And then I heard a wood knock farther up the creek, and a few moments later another wood knock farther down the creek. And after that second wood knock, something just ripped into the woods, and it sounded like bulldozers without engines tearing down underbrush. I heard a couple trees get torn down, and it would do that for like 20 seconds or so, and then it would go dead quiet, and like you'd feel claustrophobic, like you could feel them watching you, and it was like this like heavy presence, And the only noise in the woods at this time was a single crow sitting on one of those trees and almost like eye level with me. And like I felt like he was staring at me. Like even though he was staring directly on, and I guess like birds, if they're staring at you, it's at the side. But like I could see his like beak pointed at me. And it sounded like he was cackling at me. Like it sounded like he was fucking laughing at me. But that might have been more creepy than the actual Sasquatch. I wouldn't say that, but it was pretty creepy. And it would go silent for like 10 or 15 seconds, and then the commotion would start again. They'd tear back into the woods, tear back into the underbrush, and they do that again for about 20 seconds or so. Then it goes silent, and it did that off and on maybe 3 or 4 times before it just completely stopped. And I was scared shitless. I'm not gonna lie. I remember like really just wanting to get out of there. But I had to force myself to stay, because it was like I traveled 2,000 miles and spent a whole winter in Washington just to go out and do this. So I had to force myself to stay, and I really wanted to go in that night. It happened at like 6 in the afternoon, and I was trying to force myself to go in that night, but I couldn't do it. And then the next day, I was like prepping myself up all fucking day long. Like, and I was really trying to force myself to go, but I just couldn't do it. And then so the encounter happened on a Tuesday, and then on a Thursday around noon, I was smoking a chillum, and I don't know if I was like trying to clear resin or something, but I got my chillum super hot, and it was in my mouth, and it slipped out of my mouth, down my kilt, right on the head, right on the head of my glands, and left a nasty burn. Eventually turned into a huge blister. Then that blister broke. It was like torture. It was more terrifying than painful. It was extremely painful, but anyway, after that burn, I was out for like at least 2 weeks. I remember I went into town on June 1st, and I want to say this all happened like 21st, 22nd, 23rd, around then. But I went to town June 1st, and that was the first time I left my campsite since the burn, and I had just been sitting, applying Neosporin. But I remember going into town and being like, I shouldn't have done this. I'm not healed yet. So I was out for like 2 weeks, and then when I finally healed, I went to that spot and I tried to find where they were, tearing everything up. But it was such dense underbrush, and there was so much poison ivy, it just wasn't worth it. And like my whole expedition, I wasn't really interested in stuff like that. Like I probably have like 20 hours of GoPro footage, but it's mainly just vlogging. Like my philosophy was, if it's not gonna change the world, like I'm not trying to record wood knocks or cast footprints or anything like that. If it's not hard physical evidence, I really don't care. But anyway, I figured I'd just share that. I'll probably redo this story when I figure out editing a little bit better, and try to make like a graphic version or something, some sort of illustrated version, like a Bob Gimlin style. But that's just it for right now. So, all right. Also, there was one other detail I forgot to mention in the story. When the commotion stopped, when it eventually just stopped and it didn't start again, I never heard them like run away or anything. Like it just stopped, and it's like they vanished. And that was one of the most surreal things about it. Was especially after seeing how dense the underbrush was, that they could just like literally just disappear. And also, like how they got there without making any noise didn't make sense. But that was something else that was really weird about all of that.